chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through.
And we should be good to go.
Great.
It's all yours, Dave.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're here with, this is time for a little discussion about BVLOS NPRM. So Beyond Visual Line of Sight, Notice for Public Rulemaking. We've got Alex with us. Dan is here, and Rob is on audio and until he's able to make his way home. What we wanted to do is go through a couple of slides and also share what's going on and who we're talking to and what's the sense of what we're finding and what we're learning. So we've spent most of our waking hours over the last week or so reading or writing and talking to folks. As you've probably heard from, if you've been watching anything on the BVLOS NPRM, there's not anything that we can find that's really positive in it. So we've got a lot of critical comments. We're trying to be optimistic. We don't want to be just negative. The comments that we write, we will be constructive, and we've put our full narrative, it's about 20 pages, up on our website. So that's there for everyone to see. We welcome comments and markup for that. We've also got instructions on how to put together your own comments. And as we've described, unlike comments for our congressional legislation, where just copy and paste and send it on in, that's absolutely not the way it works with a notice for public rulemaking with any agency. So copies, no good. They'll just each original they'll count as one, and then any subsequent copy is a null. So we're asking that if you do submit, you submit your own comments, and anything that you find where there is a benefit, if you could articulate that, if as well as on the negative side, if the view is, well, this is negative because this is how it would impact me, that had any anecdote that you have that is real is really very useful.
And propose a solution.
And recommending an alternative. Yeah, alternative
Perfect.
Solutions.
And I was just going to look to Alex and Dan and Rob. I want them to interrupt me through this, and that was perfect. So thank you, guys. Alternatives, ideas, those are good rules for the NPRM.
Yeah, we've heard quite a few times from the FAA. If you're commenting on this stuff, don't just tell us XYZ is bad without saying, oh, XYZ is bad, but to fix XYZ, do ABC, because that would fix the whatever. It would be a solution to what they're looking for. They do want those solutions, not just pointing out that things are bad.
Yeah.
So on our Facebook page, earlier in the week, I forwarded Greg Revendu and the Pilot Institute description of the overall BVLOS NPRM. It's an excellent video. It runs about 36 minutes. So it's over 700 pages of documentation. So the video, if you want if you want to get into this, and we encourage you to, that's a great way to jump in. We are working with Greg and his team as part of and as a founding member of the Drone Advisory Council. So if you search on DAC.org, we chose the acronym DAC because that used to be the Drone Advisory Committee. But this is a group of us that are continuing to work on topics like this. So it includes Aloft, it includes Pilot Institute, influential drones, air vigilance, DSPA, Drone Service Providers Alliance, and FPVFC. For this work, we've also pulled in the FTCA, the second of four community-based organizations, just like we are one of four, and pulled in. If there are other folks that are interested in adding in comments, we're interested. So what we're going to do with the DAC is we're going to put together a set of comments that are common to all of us. So for us in FPVFC, recreational is number one. Well, for that group, one of the Part 107 issues are top order. A good example of what's near the top of the list for Part 107 operators, the day this rule goes final, all Part 107 waivers are terminated. So if you are working specific to BVLOS, if you have a Part 107 beyond visual line of sight waiver active today, the day that the final rule goes out, those are stopped. So it's a simple change in the NPRM to turn that around, and that will be a very important issue and comment for those folks who are involved on the Part 107 side of things. So, Alex, Dan, Rob, any comments so far?
Earlier you talked about us being optimistic and that there wasn't a whole lot of positive coming out of this NPRM. The one thing that is positive is that they do have the word recreational. They mention recreational. It's not great, but they didn't just totally ignore it and skip it and pretend it didn't exist like they have in the past. So, I mean, that's something.
True. And as we get into this, when I started work and started in sales and sales management, we had to wear three-piece suits, and so the expression "sleeves out of your vest" would be something that would have relevance. So this is less than sleeves out of your vest, not only for recreational, but also for small business and medium-sized business. This NPRM is focused on very large companies, and in particular, very large companies interested in getting into package delivery. But we'll try to keep it positive. This is my estimate in timing. I've worked on a lot of very large projects, thousands of people developing products, releasing simultaneously to 170 countries, projects crossing multiple years of development. I look at this and where the NPRM is largely like an RFQ, or request for quote. So there's not a lot of meat on the bones as you go through this document. There's a lot of it should be. And the FAA might characterize it as, well, this is a requirements document. It's not even that. And so it's, as they would say in Texas, they're fixing to think about it. So it is much of a meta document, and it's a meta requirement. So requirements about requirements. My estimate is that from the point that the BVLOS NPRM becomes a final rule, start a 10-year clock, and then everything will be in place. That's my estimate in terms of what all has to happen. So, well, what does that mean? What are the elements? It's reporting, recording, airworthiness acceptance, Part 146, outside of Class G, which is unmanned traffic management. It's effectively personnel, and we have to create a ConOps for operations supervisor as well as a flight coordinator. There we have to create what it means to be a base of operations. And then there's a thing called associated elements, and we have to consider that. Associated elements, it goes on and on and on through this entire NPRM. It's anything associated with a flight. So equipment, ground equipment.
Catch-all.
It is a catch-all, and it's really dangerous in my view because it's like my performance of you. It's a do good, avoid evil type of comment. So in addition with the associated elements, it just covers a lot of topics that are literally on the ground. And so equipment on the ground, personnel on the ground. And we had a number of serious discussions in the DAC and AC working closely with the FAA that the FAA's remit is in the national airspace. It is not on the ground. So we feel that they are getting into areas that are outside of their scope. So that's just some of the challenges.
So,
So,
Rebellious
Dave,
Rainbow Unicorn in the YouTube chat's asking, did the very large companies write this abomination?
We don't think so. Great question. And so there's it's behind the curtain. So the way that it's supposed to work and the way that we've been told that it was working is that a lot of research was done, and Dan and I participated for 9 months in the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee. So a 9-month period back in 2020 to 2021, or pardon me, 2021 through 2022. It was delivered in March of 22. So at about the end of March 22, the requirements were supposed to be complete. At that point, the FAA is supposed to lower a cone of silence, and they're not supposed to, gosh, that's an old reference. That goes back to the 60s. They're not supposed to talk to industry unless it's under specific NDAs and not to give a lot of background. So we don't think that it was written by folks in the industry. However, it's always a but. However, and Rob is very aware of the work down in Dallas. I think it's called a key site, and so this is an unmanned traffic management proof of concept, if you will. And so they're running tests, and there are 15 organizations involved. The FAA is involved, NASA's involved, and so there's been a ton of work done to get some of this work going. One of my severe criticisms of this NPRM is that work is not mentioned. And one of the things that we'll post are the 2 GitHubs that provide some background to the Keysight work in Texas. It's open source, it's public. We're not, it's there and available. So we're not violating any confidentiality agreements.
I would add that while large corporations maybe didn't have a direct hand in writing this NPRM, they're definitely the driving force behind having this created in the first place. Like, they're making a lot of noise, though, especially the package delivery companies and the inspection companies who want to look at railroad tracks for miles and miles and miles. Like, they've been complaining for years to the FAA that, hey, you guys are being slow. We can't legally do these things. Get off your butt and make it so we have a path forward to do this stuff. And like you've said many times, that was it Amazon or Google was practicing drone deliveries in Australia because the regulations in the United States made it prohibitive to do so.
Right,
in
absolutely.
Africa.
And Google Wing and Zipline are absolutely part of the work in Dallas. They're super smart people. These are companies with the wherewithal to have the influence. And one of the aspects that I looked at this as we went through it is, who can make money at this? And that's obvious. That regularly is a motivator of, okay, well, who would be interested in doing some of this work? And now, while there might be some folks, some companies that would sign up to do this, the way the document is written, the liability is so high because the way that the FAA has written the document is they have abdicated responsibility in almost all cases. So the level of indemnification is very, very high. And that liability would fall to the manufacturer of the Part 108 aircraft, the automated data service provider, as well as the operators, and not the FAA. So the analogy of at breakfast, you've got if you're going to bacon and eggs breakfast, you've got a chicken who's involved and a pig who's committed, And so the FAA is not even as committed as a chicken for breakfast. So
So
go ahead.
one of the questions I was going to ask is, with your 10-year estimate, which of the gates do you see as being the biggest blocker of or the biggest contributor to that?
Great
Or
question. Well, Part 146, hands down. And so 146, or the unmanned traffic management, has it requires strategic deconfliction, which is detect and avoid, as well as conformance monitoring. And conformance monitoring is a service as provided by these automated data service providers. Probably get that. It is ADSP, not ADSB. And the conformance monitoring, it locates aircraft around the Part 108 aircraft during its flight path in real time. It records that and provides that a record back to the manufacturer and the FAA. So this is that, it's a whole set of concept, and it's also providing deviation from the flight path. So there's the things that, we've not invented the code to figure this out, as in my understanding. Now maybe I'll be blown away when I dig into these two GitHubs and look a little more deeply at the key site in Texas.
Hey, Dave, I haven't been through the entire document yet. It's obviously very lengthy. I know you spent more time than I have, but I haven't heard of any mention of any type of preemption framework for different levels of priority. Is there anything that you've seen about that in the document?
Preemption, like federal preemption, or maybe I'm not understanding the question, Rob.
Like prioritization of airspace. Like you have multiple operators that are requesting access in this airspace to the automatic data service provider, and who's going to get preference, who's going to get priority, like the preemption framework.
Understood. So in terms of there is limited discussion in the document on right of way, and so it's not explicit. And it was unfortunate because we spent thousands of person hours on this topic in the BVLOS ARC. And we included people from the helicopter community, public safety community, folks who fly a lot of the time under 400 feet in helicopters. So the stipulation is, if you're flying a UAS under 400 feet, you can have right of way over a manned aircraft if the manned aircraft is not squawking, broadcasting ADSB. So so why the FAA wrote this like this, we don't know. This will cause, I'm sure it already has, the helicopter organizations, public safety organizations, DOD, to jump out of their chairs and say, no way. The reason being is many of those aircraft appropriately do not broadcast ADSB. You're in a covert operation, you're in a public safety operation, and the military is not required to broadcast ADSB. So that would create a huge safety issue, and that's not how we characterize it. I believe that's the only right of way that was discussed vis-a-vis manned aircraft. Then to your question of UAS to UAS, I did not find any explicit suggested rules, prioritization, deconfliction. That's all left to the interested student. And explicitly, the requirements of, let's see if I've got it. I think I have a slide on this. I did. Here it is. So the requirements for the unmanned traffic management are to be described explicitly in two advisory circulars, one on strategic deconfliction and one on conformance monitoring. So, and this worries me because I assert that this is skirting the rules process, because this is critical information on how do we execute and create the specification for these rules. And the FAA's point is, well, we're going to release it in an advisory circular. So we faced this in remote ID, where the FAA released 9157C.
Charlie, yep, on the FRIAs, and they basically gave a whole new set of regulations on what is required to get a FRIA, and that made our job in getting FRIAs a little bit more difficult. But eventually we figured out how to check all the boxes.
Right. So this is just an example of the FAA pointing to work that's not done, and they expect the industry to author this work.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm mildly frustrated about is, again, like I said, I haven't read the entirety of the document, but skimming and summaries and AI, I haven't seen anything about that preemption priority framework. And that's something that's critical, to me. And that's really one of the major objectives of the whole North Texas Quayside project was establishing that framework with our recommendations, because you got a manhunt on the ground for an active shooter, and you have multiple, uncrewed assets in the air on a public safety front. You can't have Chipotle delivering a burrito through your active scene. So that's mildly frustrating. And again, I had not seen anything about it, but I was curious if anybody else had run across anything addressing that, because that's been a big point of what we were trying to figure out through the Quayside.
Yep.
So with I guess a question relating to that, Rob, what with crewed aviation, when you have say a police helicopter and say a news helicopter, how does that deconfliction work?
So with the PD helicopters, SOP, best practice, even nationwide outside of our program, you're going to be required to have direct comms with the aircraft operator. So that's easy because, in a metropolitan area, you work together. So it's as easy as just jumping channels. So everybody has a hard ceiling. Everybody has a hard floor. If the crewed pilot isn't comfortable with it, generally we're going to ground our operations, but that's rare. When it comes to news helicopters, historically, now that, flight radios aren't a common thing like they used to be, it's generally a call to the tower to request them to evacuate the area because they're going to interfere. And if they don't want to, then we can seek TFRs.
Okay.
So we should mention that outside of public safety, it's illegal for a UAS operator to get on a handheld transceiver and contact an aircraft locally. That's and you get on to aircraft FM frequencies. You can do it very, very easily technologically, but it's illegal. It's against FCC and also FAA regs. So okay for public safety, not okay for civil aviation. Good
and that's
question.
even changing on the public safety front. Yeah, we used to be required to have the capability to have direct contact with crewed aviation, assets in the airspace, and those requirements are no longer part of our Part 91 or our Part 107 operations, which is a good thing in my opinion.
Yep. Okay. So
before you move on, Dave, there's some YouTube questions.
Great.
DFW FPV was in reference to you talking about it taking 10 years for this possibly to actually be implemented. He's wondering if how will the waivers change in that time? There's something that's not talked about, and he worries about it. And then I think he also talks about he's thinking about the BV loss waivers and other aspects of 107. Will they change within the scale of UAS operations expected in the next 3 to 5 years, as this is being worked on also, I suppose?
Great set of questions. So Part 107, 44809, Part 108 are very different. We anticipate that Part 107 and 44809 will continue on into the future. We further, there's a clause in Part 108 that says BV loss Part 107 waivers will be terminated upon the effective date of Part 108. So that's an enormous issue because there's public safety BV loss waivers, there are business BV loss waivers. So that's a 3-alarm fire in our view. I hope and so The other waivers, we would anticipate they will be untouched because Part 107 will continue, as will 44809. 44809 does not have waivers, but there are exceptions, a couple thousand of them right now, for high altitude flight that the AMA has gotten granted.
I think this also highlights that this NPRM also talks about the separation between Part 107 and Part 108, right? Like BV loss is completely this new thing, and it's being removed entirely from Part 107, right?
Yeah, so a good way to swing into this recreational slide is to start right here on the bottom. All Part 108 aircraft are fully autonomous, no pilot in the loop, no controls, and the expectation is that a pilot is not flying this aircraft. So therefore, there is no pilot exam, no test, no medical required, because the assumption is that this is a fully autonomous aircraft.
So that's not flying FPV a mile away beyond visual line of sight, because that's a totally different thing. That's not covered at all by this NPRM.
Correct. The notion of, we spent a lot of time in the BV loss ARC, Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee, putting forward recommendations for extended visual line of sight, which would be a near-in BV loss. If you fly 107 today, you know that you cannot fly behind a house, behind a tree, under a bridge. If you can't see it, you're flying BV loss. So we wanted EV loss, or extended visual line of sight, to accommodate for that near-in location. Not mentioned in this document, and so that's another issue. Shielded operations is mentioned, but it's pathetic. So it's another one of the sleeves out of the vest. So the good news, as Dan said, the good news is there is a recreational section in this. It's 108.475 if memory suits. We can fly 10 nautical miles, or 11 and a half miles away. Awesome. Up to 55 pounds. Pretty sweet. We can fly in category 3. So these categories are different from they're completely different and have nothing to do with operations over people categories. So they created a whole new set of categories. This has everything to do with population density. Category 3 is ridiculously sparse. So all of us, so it's not feeling so good, even now. Now the good news as well is we get a buy, or we're not required as a recreational operator. Remember, not necessarily an individual, but it could be a company. No pilot concept here, but we do not have to put together a company operation. We don't have to have 5 hours experience. We don't have to articulate and document what a base of operations is. We don't have to have the personnel identified of a supervisor, but we are required to provide all of the responsibilities under them. And we don't have to write or execute our own cybersecurity plan. And we also don't have the 14-hour duty and rest requirements, so that all sounds not too bad, but of course, the but is on this slide. We need operator responsibilities, supervisor and flight coordinator responsibilities, strategic deconfliction and conformance monitoring. Those are the 2 items that in answering Alex's question, that are the long lead time items. We have to do record keeping and reports, and we have to be able to continue to receive command and control. That's what C2 is, and to be able to fly to be able to continue to fly, and to have full communications with the ground after a lightning strike. So we looked into that. We figure it's probably possible to keep a lot of the electronics safe from lightning if we created something like a Faraday cage, but we're struggling on how this ever could be possible with the motors. And we must pass a TSA assessment. So record keeping and reporting. Let me just quick pop down to this.
You also jumped past standard remote ID, right?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I did. Good catch. Where is that?
Next slide.
There it is, right here. Our favorite. So there's a little bit of
But you can swap modules, but you can't use them anyway. So
Right. So, so it has to be standard, which means integrated remote ID. As everyone here listening to us probably knows, the difference between a module and remote ID is a couple things. Standard is integrated in that during a power on self test of the remote ID system, if it fails, it has the ability to prevent the aircraft from taking off. And the other big one is the ground control station, that is the transmitter or controller in your hands, has to broadcast a GPS on a dynamic basis. So if you move, your remote ID message updates the location to the GCS on a 1 hertz basis or once a second. Thanks, Dan, for catching that one. The reporting and monitoring, this one blew my mind. And so this is the required reporting for everyone. And so one of the constants in all of the work that we did on the dozen DAC and AC task forces is that we had a lot of sensible people who said one size does not fit all. In anything we did, we said there needs to be an ability from small to large UAS where the regulations scale up. And so it gets more restrictive and more complicated the larger and faster and farther away you go. Made sense to us. That's not what this NPRM is about. This NPRM is one size fits all. So there's no benefit for a small company, a mid-sized company, or recreational other than those one areas on the record keeping that I described earlier. So if you're able to see this, you can see very quickly flight data to the FAA and the manufacturer. All planned, unplanned landings is considered an interruption and has to be reported. Any momentary interruption has to be reported. If you have a parts failure, you are supposed to identify what the system cause was and identify appropriate remedy to the manufacturer as the operator. You're paying for this conformance monitoring, and so if the ADSP, Automated Data Service Provider, has an outage, it's on you, the operator, to report it. And my reaction to that was, that's a joke. Come on, you got to be kidding. We also have to report all security breaches, and a security breach could be anything where the operator loses control. And they stipulate the next one that this is different from Part 107. Property damage greater than $500 has to be reported. That's the same as Part 107. So if you happen to be flying both under 107 to 108 and you damage some property, probably have to submit double reports. Record keeping at least once a month, total time in service for each aircraft, status of life limited parts, records for each flight, time duration, registration type, individual flight, paths, origins. So you're reading through this list and you go, whoa. Well, that one in the middle, paths, individual flight path. So that means they want the full flight path as part of the approval process. And this is where it comes in the conformance monitoring, that in real time, you have to attest to any deviation from the flight path.
Yeah, I would like to submit my flight path for flying BV loss around a bando, please.
Exactly.
This squiggly line, Mark. Yeah, and if you take a left when you should have taken a right, you're in trouble.
And if you land, and if you break something, so you can articulate consumables, and batteries are considered consumables. So you can get away without having to submit a monthly report on batteries that you remove and put back in or replace in the aircraft, but you have to have manufacturer instructions and company procedures on that you're going to do that. So I hope you can get the feeling from that just as a recreational operator, that we needed to include all of that level of record keeping and recording. And of course, it's the same if you're Google Wing or a large company doing package delivery. Okay. Another area that has changed is airworthiness acceptance. So this is an attempt to improve the type certification capabilities that the FAA has today. So if you've listened or read up on why has Amazon been having a difficult time in the package delivery business, it's largely because of type cert. They've only, I believe, recently gotten their type certification, so it's probably close to 10 years of work and an enormous amount of money spent to convey what's the structure. It's gone through n number of hours of testing, and any changes to this aircraft structure require meticulous updates, more testing, etc. So the idea is to change this over to an airworthiness acceptance. And so once again, it's not written down really what the details are on this. The objective is that this will be up to the industry to create this. So once again, this is why I start to look at something approaching 10 years before this is going to happen. So of note, Part 107 took 10 years. Remote ID was 6 years in the making. So we are working at the speed of government, as some of the folks in the FAA would talk to us about.
There's some YouTube discussion about like weight limits and how they think Morton's talking about. He thinks the 250 gram limit should be more like 501 kilogram. And we could probably briefly mention how we tried to push for a 1 kilogram limit, but I believe we got no takers, no traction on that. And this Part 108 NPRM does talk about not so much weight limits, but is kinetic energy, right? For some of the rules.
Yes, yes. So there are some papers authored by one of the Google Wing engineering managers. A brilliant piece of work, and it's called Target Level of Safety. And so it takes into account the mass of the aircraft, but also the frangibility of the aircraft. And if you know anything about crash helmets, you know that when you if you're on a motorcycle, say, and you hit the ground and hopefully you're wearing a helmet, the helmet absorbs a lot of energy by braking. So that's its frangible characteristics. Google has figured that out a lot. And so when you look at a Google package delivery aircraft, the fuselage is made of foam. So it will not kill a person if it hits a person at speed. So really smart engineering. We asked the FAA to consider this type of energy and this whole structure of how to be safe in UAS. That was in tasking number 11. I want to say 2020 or 2021. They refused. Nope, not going to do it. And the BVLOS NPRM has everything to do with kinetic energy. Very, very unfortunate. So, state of the art, 1950s. Weight limits. There are 3 weight limits discussed. There's up to 55, under, I want to say 100, and then 1,320. 1320, it's an even 600 keys.
Yeah, 1,300 and some pounds, right? Like they're talking
1,000,
huge.
Right, 1,320 pounds or 600 kilograms. And so there is no discussion in this of 250 grams. It's up to 55 pounds, up to 100 pounds, up to 1,320 pounds. So those are the discussion. Since we're talking about companies and flights, the taxonomy talks about permits and certificates. And so if you read up on that, you can see that if you're a large company and you have the ability to have a lot of personnel working on this, a certificate can get you a larger UAS fleet, and you can there are not that many, but you can probably get up into the heavy lifter 1,320 pound aircraft. Things like agricultural spraying, and I think aerial surveying. And there probably are one or two others. I did not focus too deeply on that, but we will across the drone advisory committee. Alex, anything that comes that any questions or like, oh boy, so I don't want to go on.
Not really.
Okay.
I don't have any.
Not really. Oh my gosh. So where does this leave recreational? So where, as you can see, we've written up the comments that we'll be putting forward, and there are two areas that I'd like to talk about, and that is what would you recommend? Okay, I've done a lot of complaining. How would you fix this, Messina? And how would you fix this, FPVFC? So for the recreational, we think all the reporting and record keeping for recreational is ridiculous. And as Dan said, so I'm going to submit a flight plan for my Bando FPV. It's just like, what are you doing? What are you doing to us? And so we have articulated to the FAA, to the Department of Commerce, that recreational UAS remains the largest cohort in the United States at about 1.5 million. And so if you think about who was this document written for, we figure it was under 1% of the aircraft that are flying today and package delivery. So if package delivery took off, if you'll forgive the expression, it would be a while before they met the level of recreational aircraft flying today. So back to this, no personnel requirements. The notion of, well, you need a flight coordinator, you have to take on responsibility as a supervisor. Stop. No. We would be okay with an exam. You want to fly beyond visual line of sight to some level? Great. Why not make it, so Greg at Pilot Institute, he'd like the overall idea of one of the things we do in manned aircraft is you get your base rating, and then you have it augment. So, you got multi-engine, it's a different rating. Oh, you're an instructor, a different rating. So how about a recreational with a BV loss rating? What's really important to us in recreation in terms of safety? Propellers, batteries, airspace authorization. So knowing a lot about where you're going to fly, say it's 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles. Say it's a corridor if you're doing research. If you're experimenting with innovative antennas and you want to go out 50 miles, well, why not allow us to do that, out, where there are no people. We also want to carve out for DIY aircraft to minimize airworthiness, acceptance, maintenance, and alterations. Meaning, right now, the way that the NPRM is written, I can't see that any of us could build an aircraft that would pass all of the requirements in this document. It would have to be standard remote ID. We know a couple of ways that we might be able to do that and get it passed through a current remote ID means of compliance. But then we also have to have all of the maintenance, alteration, and the whole acceptance process, again, means that we would have to adhere to a yet unwritten standard, which would become a means of compliance, and then we would have to apply for a declaration of compliance as an individual.
The part about being able to operate after a lightning strike too is just like silly and ridiculous, and it definitely makes me think about the one-size-fits-all approach that they take. Like, so let's say you're flying a foam wing airplane and you want to fly it a little bit farther away behind some trees beyond visual line of sight, and it gets hit by lightning and it explodes into a billion pieces of styrofoam. Who cares if that can't keep flying?
Exactly.
Like, so
what's the damage you're gonna do? Also, what's the probability of actually getting struck by lightning in the first place? It's such a small aircraft for what we fly.
And then having the pieces fall and hit somebody and hurt someone, like,
Right.
But they're just not imagining that somebody might want to fly a 400-gram aircraft slightly beyond visual line of sight, and it might, it's just infuriating in that aspect.
Like, I think we should be asking for, yeah, in addition to removing the lightning strike, just basically saying that we have to just basically look at the weather and make a judgment call off the weather.
Yeah,
I don't think it's that difficult.
yeah, and
We
Dan,
have to
like a
specify.
1,320-pound aircraft, that might make sense, but
Yep.
not recreational ops.
Right, and I'm fine limiting rec to 55 and under, and that's what small UAS is today, and that's, you know, if anyone here has flown a 55-pound RC plane or a 55-pound drone, that's pretty hefty aircraft. The other recommendation Alex had this was, why don't we leverage FRIAs for this? So if you've got a FRIA, or maybe we kick up a special FRIA for beyond visual line of sight. I like that idea. It's along the lines of the rating and building on what we have. So the summary of that is, without these changes, we don't think that recreational beyond visual line of sight is viable. Because when I first got the document, I figured, if this is possible, let's, a couple of us in FPVFC, let's figure out if we can do what's required. And looking at this, it's like, no, I can't see, those of us on this call, plus Josh, plus Blunty, being able to put together a recreational BB loss aircraft. It would be very expensive, and then getting the approvals for it would be time consuming and expensive, and it'd be
it's almost like a more complex waiver than what's required now.
Oh yeah, much more complex.
Like,
the
if you compare it to the
documentation
waivers,
is orders of magnitude more documentation and record keeping. Yes.
like it's almost harder to fly BB loss with this rule than now with a waiver.
Right. So we encourage questions now. We encourage, so the due date on the comment period is October 6th. If you want to reach me on Discord, great. If you want to send, if you just go to our website and do a contact us, and in the subject, BV Loss NPRM, we're interested. And as I said, where this is going to have some impact is that if you can articulate an alternative or why this is bad for me, you will put me out of business. That would be very helpful. And I know that we're talking mostly of recreation.
Put me out of my hobby. Like, I won't be able to exercise my hobby. I've been doing this for X years, or I just got into this and I'm hooked, but now this rule is preventing me from doing what I want. So like, I've been in this for a dozen years, or I'm brand new and I'm hooked. It all works, and those are all very strong examples. And the more of that we get, it shows how it's not just commercial operators looking for this, it's also recreational folks. So we don't want recreational to go underwater, really. We want it to still be heard, but we need to say that this affects us too. We're not making money with this, but we're having fun with this. This is how we enjoy life.
And this is how we encourage kids to get into aviation. This is how kids figure out, oh, maybe this part of STEM is where I want to work. And this creates a pool not only of engineers and programmers, but airframe and power plant technicians, as well as pilots. Oh gosh, did I say pilot? Operator.
Remote pilot in command.
Pilots. We feel strongly that that 108 needs to have a provision for a pilot in the loop, meaning you should be able to control a Part 108 cleared aircraft. We know the FAA is going to have challenges with that because they're going to say at significant beyond visual line of sight, then you're going to need a medical. And our response is fine. Let's go. That's what the recommendation of the ARC was. Yeah, 108 is probably going to require a medical.
The more I
So-
look at these regulations or this proposal, the more I'm just sort of not sure, like, what was the FAA thinking or not thinking? Like, did they put some of this stuff in there on purpose because they want to make it really difficult for us to fly recreationally? Or were they just not actually paying attention and they just overlooked and just threw a bunch of stuff in there and don't realize they're making it basically impossible to fly? And I'm like, it could go either way, or maybe it's both. I don't know.
Yeah, so I've been watching LinkedIn, and the three authors of Part 146 were talking about it, how difficult it was. They're very proud to have written it. And I empathize that this was very difficult, but they wrote over 100 pages on what effectively is a request for quote. There's really not a lot of meat in here. There's, from someone from the product world in global tech, we would think about terms like what's the target market you're going after? Who's your customer? Who's going to be using this thing? What are the market requirements and then product objectives? All of that type of discussion is absent from here, and that's included. That's a to be continued in those advisory circulars. So the other aspect of it, that I spent close to 4 decades in global tech, and I worked every day with wonderful software developers. Dan works closely with software developers. I had the privilege of working with people who wrote mainframe operating systems, compilers, storage arrays. So from application down to firmware, and highly distributed systems that were absolutely mission critical. Our systems carried the nuclear codes for the United States and Russia. So I get it in terms of things that have to be secure. But when I look at what was written for the unmanned traffic management, there was a lack of currency in what they were writing. It was obsolete to the tune of 25 to 30 years ago, which is why my recommendation on the unmanned traffic management section of this NPRM is start over. And as I mentioned earlier, authors of this section, they ignored 10 years of work done by NASA in unmanned traffic management, and they ignored years of work done by ASTM and also RCTA, the latter two being international standards bodies, which this document points to as potentially appropriate authors for work in the future. Well, they spent 3 years on this, right? We finished the ARC in 2022. It was submitted to the FAA. So they can't include something that's modern, that's current, and work that's been done. So pretty frustrating. Questions?
So one of the things I'm seeing in the chat is people talking about how this is stuff that we're already doing illegally, essentially, or against current regs, or that these regs aren't necessary for the aircraft that we fly. So why, kind of like, what's the point of this, almost? And so I think in response to that kind of thing, the point of this, and you should include this in your comments, is to show that we have been doing this and we have done it safely. Because essentially, every time we talk to the FAA and we say, yeah, we've been doing this for years like this, they are like, okay, but we don't have the data to show that proof, because they don't track that we're doing it against their regs. So in your comments for this kind of stuff, this allows us to do it legally, or this could potentially allow us to do it legally if we can get comments and get the FAA to realize how they can implement what we do. So if you comment saying, oh, this is how I fly, this is what we've been flying like for this, I have seen friends that fly like this, this is what we do to stay safe when we go fly. Maybe you go with a group of friends to a bando, you can say, this is what I do when I fly. This would be considered BV loss. This isn't included in this rule, but we've been doing this for 5 years as a group of buddies, and we go every weekend, do this kind of thing, never had any incidents, stuff like that. if you can provide that in your comments, that
Right.
could make what's currently against regs now influence the final rule to something that could be something where you don't have to do it against regs.
I think the best way to articulate that would be to describe long-range BB loss outside of the United States. Because in the document, the FAA cited that they have no data on recreational BV loss. It's like, no kidding. I mean, they've been telling us for years, look, if you go do long range BV loss, that's an area where there will be enforcement. We take that very seriously. So what did we do when someone would post a long range BV loss flight? We'd quietly contact them and say, you might want to take that video down. You really don't want to advertise that. There are a couple of organizations that quietly fly long range BV loss. Well, it's against the regs today. So wouldn't it be clever if we made it legal so that these folks who are optimizing antenna design, stretching the envelope, creating more innovation, just like FPV has done for years, wouldn't it be cool? So Alex, I think you're on a good point, and looking outside of the United States, outside of the FAA's area of authority might be a way for it.
What I would really like to see is just add in something about extended visual line of sight or whatever you want to call it, like not very far BV loss. Like that would cover a ton of recreational flights.
Yes.
And it was expected, but
it really was. I mean, the videographers on the BV loss are, when we started to describe what we wanted in recreational, we were like, okay, we're going to call this EV loss. And they were really excited, and it pushed, we documented the heck out of it, what we're looking for. And a big part of why it was not viewed as acceptable, it was the helicopter folks doing mostly public safety and also medical work. There is one of the thoughts that has come back to us again and again since we've started, which is unreasonable regulations will be met with widespread non-compliance. So I view the recreational BV loss part of this regulation as completely unreasonable. So if the FAA expects compliance, what I think will happen is, right now I would predict that our community would say, why bother? I just won't fly BV loss, long, like I'm not going to fly 20 miles out. Not going to, it's not bothered. It's not worth the hassle. It's not worth, the risk. But wouldn't it be cool to have, to be able to do this legally with none of, as we specified, none of the silliness. There's also one of the comments for me, for someone who has worked years in corporate contracts, the tone and the language in this proposed rule uses absolutes. And the operator will be responsible for all situations. And again and again and again, so the liability is absolute on the belonging to the operator or manufacturer. And that's not how physics works. So it was, when I looked at who wrote this, I was severely disappointed in that regard. And that is one area that is consistent throughout this entire NPRM, is this just complete abdication and an absolute that would all liability would fall to either the operator or the manufacturer, and nothing ever would fall on the FAA the way this is written. Okay, so we are going to continue to refine our comments. We would welcome any questions, concerns. If someone figures, hey, Messina, you got it, you have this wrong, let me know. We have not cornered the market on firm ideas or good ideas on this. we're really open to lots of ideas and critiques. And we will encourage you to write your own comments as we've described. If you have questions on, I read the instructions and I'm still not sure how you do this, let us ask us. We've done it. We've done comments on this and on multiple other documents from other agencies this year. So we know how, it's not hard. It's, write a PDF if you want. If not, copy and paste it into the form and off it goes. And I think that was, so as I say, we will continue to refine it. There are up in the front of this, there were a couple of areas where we did not focus on at all. Package pickup, aerial surveying, and there were a couple others, ag spraying as well. I didn't dig into those very deeply. I might go back and pick up the aerial surveying because I think that includes videography. Yes, I feel that's a very close adjacent technology to FPV work. If you're flying FPV, you go get your 107. It's a natural that you're going to be doing videography. So
Also,
go ahead. Oh yeah, there was one other area I did want to mention. Go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to mention with the areas that say we're not going to be commenting on, like the package pickup and aerial surveying type stuff. With that, for everyone else, when you comment, it might also be good to mention something saying, hey, we looked at this section, but we're not experienced into this section, so we're not going to comment on it. That way it shows that you've read the rule.
Right.
It helps show that you're involved in the rule. It shows that you're paying attention to it, because you could just ignore it. But if you say, oh, I looked at this area, but I'm not an expert in this area, I suggest listening to someone else who might be an expert, essentially, or suggest listening to other companies that are in that area, because that could be beneficial and it could be helpful.
Yes.
In the rulemaking process, it might give your comment more weight, saying, since you went and commented on something that maybe you don't have the experience in, but saying that just gives you a little bit more authority in a sense and credibility.
Well said. An additional area that I wanted to mention was TSA mostly, but the FAA as well. TSA explicitly stated that they will be likely adding additional security requirements and regulations to the rule in the final rule and not putting them out for public comment. That's against the law. So we're going to, until they do it, they haven't done anything, so they haven't violated any statute. When the final law comes out, so we're going to flag it as a comment, or we're going to raise the flag, if you will, and say, the TSA has gone on record and stated that they plan to violate a statute. When that happens, then it's the onus is, okay, what action do we take? Because this is not how regulations and rules across the federal government are written, and this is the law. This is not a reg. So that's an issue here. And as I say, TSA has explicitly commented that they will add additional security regulations into this rule, and we feel that the advisory circulars skirt this same issue if they are going around or obfuscating a comment period by using the advisory circular to add content to a rule. So, well, and other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the show? So we apologize that this is a lot of negative, but we feel this is critically important for us to comment on this, to work on this, because if we continue to demonstrate that recreational community is important, critical to the future of UAS in the United States, that we are supportive of the growth of UAS in the United States and the whole industry, that's where we're coming from, and we really want to help improve the overall program. So we think it's, and then the other way, if we were just said, oh, the heck with it, we're not even going to bother commenting, I'm nervous that then we would see additional regulations on recreational, and that's not the direction we want to go. We want to make recreational flight as easy and frictionless for individuals as possible.
And I wanted to quickly read one more comment from the YouTube chat. Ken Sherman was saying that he thinks people in the FPV community need to be concerned with Part 108 having precedent in terms of rights of way over a Part 107 flight. So there's possibilities that what happens with Part 108 will impact what we can do when we're recreationally flying. I assume in response to like right of way that somebody who's flying BV lost would have the right of way and you need to somehow get out of their way and things like that.
Great point. We have I have not seen, and maybe I just missed it, a right of way hierarchy where 108 takes precedent over 107. It makes sense, and that's what we recommended in the ARC, but I didn't see it in the NPRM. It's so it's something I can go look for. The only right of way that I read about was the under 500 feet. If a manned aircraft is not squawking ADS-B, the Part 108 aircraft takes precedence in terms of right of way.
Ken's responding to that, saying that Part 108 requires deconfliction, and a void is only to aircraft that emit ADS-B. Yeah, so there's some ambiguity maybe on what does deconfliction mean and how does that impact other people.
The requirements will be in the advisory circulars. I mean, I honestly feel that's what the FAA is, and of course the advisory circulars. The FAA is abdicating, and those will be written by industry standards organizations, and then become MOCs, and then become would have to then create a declaration of compliance for the aircraft or for the ADS-Ps.
If you're a Part 108 drone flying out there and you need to deconflict the airspace, you just blast that recreational drone out of the sky and deconfliction taken care of.
It's still that was a joke. It's still an aircraft. It's still a felony.
And that was actually clarified in the NPRM too.
Oh, that's right. That was one of the positives.
That the NPRM did add that as something stated by the FAA, that it is that it is against regs.
Yeah. So, and this was typical. So I was delighted to see in here that there is, it is not allowed to take a UAS out of the sky. Great.
Or interfere with the crew.
So that's a big plus. So, but what does it mean? What's the as Paul Harvey would say, the next what's the next page? What's the enforcement? What is the what's the penalty behind that? Is it a felony? I mean, today taking an aircraft out of the sky is a felony. What does it mean that you cannot interfere with a ground crew?
Well, does this also allow the FAA to enforce it instead of having to let the DOJ enforce it? Because currently only the DOJ can enforce it. The FAA can only pass it to the DOJ. But with this, I think it might allow the FAA to actually enforce it too. It might not be as strong of an enforcement, but it gives another avenue for enforcement, possibly. I have to reread it to double check that. I don't know, but that's
Okay.
I did want to add one more thing about commenting, because in comments, one of the other things in your comment is what you add to your comment, even if the FAA doesn't take it into the final rule, if say something happens or one of the things you comment in there, like say you comment of a scenario happening and then but the FAA doesn't do anything to account for it in the final rule, then later that scenario happens, that can be used against the FAA to say, hey, the FAA didn't account for this, yet they were notified of this as a possibility with the rule, but they chose not to implement this kind of thing. It's a way to add liability to the FAA by commenting. So if you comment, you can create liability for the FAA and make them have to account for stuff, because if they don't, then the FAA could be liable, and that is another benefit that is in commenting.
That's good. It's good. In addition, if there is a recreational business or a commercial business that uses drones that you feel, oh, these folks should send in a comment, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure. If you want to get us in touch with someone that we can help create a comment, we can ghostwrite it, whatever works. We're happy to help because we're trying to reach out to other industries for whom drones are very important, and this rule is very important. Surveying is a good example. So other inspections, construction inspection, aircraft inspections. So any other organization, any company that you can think of that either is in recreation or in commercial, let's try to get folks to comment. And as I said, deadline is October 6th. Anything else, Dan? Any other questions popping up?
Not really. I guess I think Double A is saying, "Are you sure?" to Alex, talking about the comments and giving them
So
examples.
liability.
I mean, it
That
really
that
depends on the
that
scenario you're talking about.
so that recommendation came from one of the panels at the AVSI symposium in DC. It was with a group of, I think some of them were lawyers, and then some of them were senior in some of the drone delivery companies. And so that was one of the things that they mentioned, saying is it could add liability to it. So that's where I got that information from. So that's my source on that. But yeah.
It's a good proof point. Other questions coming up from listeners? All right, we've gone a bit over. We are really grateful for the very good questions and for folks listening in. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, let us, you want to get a hold of us, look at the website. Thanks to Dan, we have our narrative comments in draft up there ready. We most certainly will be adding to them as we refine critical elements coming from our colleagues in the Drone Advisory Council. And we're also, there are instructions there on how to ask us questions if you have questions about your own comments. Anything else in closing, Alex?
Dave, how would you like to answer the question, does the FPVFC have a lawyer?
We do not at this point. We can certainly engage one if we need to. I don't feel that we're at a place that we are incurring liability at this point by providing comments.
Sounds good. I think we're way over time, and we should call it for now. And we'll have another meeting in 2 weeks, and maybe in that one we'll go over some of our comments if we've got time.
We'll have gone down the road on this a bit more. Thank you everyone for your patience, and have a good evening. Alex, Rob, and Dan, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yep. See you later.
Fly so high, I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Flying, get on board. We're smiling on top of the world. Dangerous times, don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. together if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky